Welcome, everyone, to Latter Daily Digest. We honor creators, and we're going to do part B of Writing Mormon History, Volume 2, with Joe Geisner and Debbie Donovan as my co-host. And we're going to hop right in and talk about the next author. So I hope you enjoy this part B. Thanks.
So Mike Homer is a very close friend, and Mike is actually writing a book right now on blood atonement and the oath of vengeance. So that's his next work. And so anyway, so there's nothing in his chapter about that. Okay.
Right.
But Mike has written multiple books. The one that is probably most famous for outside of the world of Sherlock Holmes. Mike is actually one of the top scholars in the world of Sherlock Holmes as well. And so he gets invited to all the big Sherlock Holmes conventions and everything.
Possibly.
But yeah, so and you do know there is a Mormon tie-in with Sherlock Holmes, right?
The very first book,
yes,
Study in Scarlet.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, it was referenced in there. You're right. Okay.
Study
you can tell that it's anti-Mormon lies because one character commits suicide by jumping from the temple into the Salt Lake.
Yeah, that's right. So
that makes the whole thing an anti-Mormon lie.
That's right. It's an anti. Yeah.
But now that I look back, it probably has more truth in it than other things that I learned about Mormon history of that period.
Probably, but it is a work of fiction, and that's right. I always get a kick out of people, well, it does, they got, I think in this new movie Heretic, which we brought up earlier, I've already seen people say, well, they got this wrong and they got that wrong. They don't talk about all the stuff they got right. They never talk about that part, and I guess they got a lot of right, is my understanding. They got a lot right. And
I enjoyed it.
You're going to say something, Debbie, and I interrupted you.
No, I was like, I think that's absolutely true, is they always want to say what's never right without admitting what was actually
right. Right. So, so
and without saying that, here's all the things the church got wrong about history. You never hear that from apologists.
Right. That's right. That's right.
They call that the CS letters.
Yeah. Well, Joseph, you look at Joseph Fielding Smith's Essentials in Church History, and, it didn't get hardly anything right, but yet it was the manual for what, 50,
well, I have a book on Joseph Fielding Smith who wrote the history of Joseph Smith, and you're like, now reading it with different eyes, you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like, talk about fan fiction.
Right. That was his father. Yeah. And though he did have access to diaries, his father's diaries, that we all thought were lost. Actually, I gave papers this last summer on lost documents, so I included Joseph Smith's journals in that, and come to find out the church actually does have them. The Joseph Fielding Smith probably just hid them, and they finally come to light. They're finally, now we know that the church history library actually does have those journals now.
Joseph Fielding Smith must have been really good at hide and seek when he was a kid.
Probably. He was definitely an interesting person, and it's great. Oh, and by the way, Matt Bowman, you talk about this Joseph Fielding Smith. Matt Bowman's the one who wrote the chapter in this book, not about his biography of Joseph Fielding Smith, but about his Mormon people history. So you're getting, these people that are in these two volumes, the amount of influence is just mind-boggling, so. Okay.
It sounds amazing. I'm like, I want to read it. I mean, just that's like so up my alley as far as
that's right.
Stories.
Now available on Amazon
and Benchmark Books.
And Benchmark Books in Salt Lake.
It's 801-486-3111.
That's a direct line, the hotline to Benchmark Books.
The Benchmark Books, they are open Mondays through Fridays from 10 a.m. Mountain Time to 6 p.m. Mountain Time, I believe. So, okay, next person. And this was another coup, okay? All these people were coups, but and I've said it so many times. I've been saying this now since the first book came out, that these are private people who have opened their lives up and given us things that their intimate look. Condon has said numerous times, who we were just talking about, Condon has said, I wish I had these volumes when I was doing my PhD program. He said, these are a go-to book. If you're getting your PhD, you need to read these. And he's right. These are the people who went through it, and they're telling you what they went through. And so to help you make it.
And I'll have to say that my podcast is actually in part based on Writing Mormon History 1, because I was so enthralled with the backstory to the creative process. What drove people? Sometimes just a housewife saw a sign in Wisconsin, and it ended up being a book about the Strangites.
Yep. And Vicky has gone on to do amazing things because of that, and so, yeah. So matter of fact, this past MHA, I had, I don't know, a few, but it was more than I expected. PhD students currently saying, you're Joe Geisner. And I say, yeah, thinking, what did I do now? Obviously I've done something bad. And
you're my dad. No,
yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. I just did 23andMe, and yeah. Anyway, so they say to me, thank you so much. Your book helped me get through my PhD program, or is helping me get through so yeah. So it makes me happy. So anyway, back to my next coup, Roger Launius. So Roger doesn't write actually about his most famous book. He writes about, and it'll be fun because Writing Mormon History Volume 3 is going to have Matt Harris. So on his Second Class Saints. But Roger,
right now people are beating a path to your door.
That's right. That's exactly right. So Roger wrote a book that's it's very difficult to find copies of. It's called Invisible Saints. And Roger's book is about Black members of the RLDS Church Community of Christ. And Roger was the official historian for NASA. And so this is a guy who is, in the world of historians, is an extremely prestigious person. And he wrote the official biography, not official in the church's sense. I'm sure that at the time the RLDS Church wasn't super excited about his book, though it's a very sympathetic book of Joseph Smith III, and it is the go-to. If you want to learn about the RLDS Church and the beginnings of it, you go to Roger's work, Joseph Smith III. But that's not what Roger's chapter is about. Roger's chapter is about the Invisible Saints. And it's a very personal story because Roger grew up in the South, and he saw things as a young boy and as a young man that we would just be sickened by today. Though I have to wonder if some of those things still aren't occurring. But anyway, so Roger writes this very personal story. The next person's William Moraine. Oh, and by the way, Roger grew up in the RLDS tradition. William Moraine, is a physician.
So just real quick, back to that book. He grew up in the RLDS tradition, and he's writing about the perspective of RLDS Blacks experience?
Yes, that is correct.
Even though the RLDS Blacks received the priesthood from near the beginning of the RLDS,
that is also correct.
They still were mistreated because of prejudice.
Invisible saints, as Roger says, invisible saints.
Yeah, cool.
And going back to Alice Birch's book, it's really a remarkable book, and the Deseret book published it is actually a really is remarkable in and of itself. And they held a big gala for it too. And wow. Alice writes about all this in her book or in her chapter. But yeah, you know, and if you read Matt Harris's book, you know, you see. Yeah. And Alice was somebody who Matt went to often over for information. So, you know, again, these Writing Mormon History books have some really important people. So Bill Moraine is a medical doctor, and his book is the analysis of the trauma that Joseph Smith experienced having his leg, the surgery, and he looks at the trauma of that and how that influenced the rest of Joseph Smith's life. And obviously, a lot of people did not like it. You know, they called Bill his book much like they call, and I'm talking, when I say they, I mean apologists for the most part. What Fawn Brodie, you know, pseudo psychiatric analysis, you know, or pseudo psychiatric history. And so, you know, people
taking a page out of Hugh Nibley's book,
right,
or pamphlet, or whatever he wrote.
Instead of no man, that's not history, he should have written one about Bill Moraine. Go, no ma'am, or no sir, that's not a sword, or something. I don't know. Right. So yeah, so Bill does this book on that, and so Bill writes about his experience writing it and the repercussions of that. Bill is also RLDS, Tradition Community of Christ. Connell O'Donovan. Connell's actually written a book, but it's not been published. I doubt it will ever be published. But Connell is openly queer. He's been open as long as I know him, and I've known him for a long. I mean, you know, and actually his chapter, you know, I've read these chapters so long ago. But you know, I'm sure Connell brings up when he came out, and he did a book on one of Brigham Young's wives, Augusta Cobb, and Adams. I think Augusta Cobb Adams or Augusta Adams, yeah. And anyway, it's an amazing book, but it probably will never be published. But what Connell has done is, and he is working on, I think, 2 works, but they're focused on Utah, secular, more. But again, how do you separate secular and religion in Utah? Utah is a theocracy, so it continues to be, and probably will for another 100 years, you know. And so, but Connell's doing a history on queer life, and cross-dressing and trans. And his work is groundbreaking. He just did a paper last Sunstone on cross-dressing and in Utah. And, you know, he goes all the way back to like the 1840s, maybe, or 1850s. And it's mind-boggling the amount and how these were respected people in the community. And they weren't just cross-dressing.
Well, Joseph Smith, or Brigham Young's son, Madame Petrini, who...
That is, and it was Connell who was the one who broke that whole story about that. So, yeah. So this is Connell's work. So, yeah, everybody should be giving credit to Connell over that kind of stuff. The Connell also did, he was one of the first people to show that, and it's taken me a long time, but to show that it was actually Brigham Young who did the denial of priesthood. I had always felt that it was Joseph Smith who had denied priesthood to blacks, but But Connell's research pretty well confirms that it was Brigham Young who brought about the ban. And it was, though Joe Smith was no friend to blacks. I'm not, and Connell would be the first to say that. And he was a racist, and his scripture was racist. And it just allowed Brigham Young to up the ante of being even more.
Well, I heard a rumor before Brigham Young joined the church that he was a slave trader in the South. Is that, or that that was his profession?
Yeah, no, he was a carpenter.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
like
he was
Jesus.
a carpenter. Yeah, though there were Mormons. Is it John Brown or James? One of the great pioneer. Like all the Browns, I mean, come from. Well, there's James Brown and John Brown, and they weren't related. But so all the Browns. But like I think it's Hubie Brown comes from the one who was the slave owner, Amy Brown, Lyman. I mean, all the famous Browns. Anyway, so that's Connell. Taylor Petrie, we talked a little bit about that. He's again one of these up and coming. They're in their 30s, 40s. But they're he's this new generation looking at things completely different. And his book, which is a big award winner. And by the way, he was I think he may still be the editor, but he was the editor. Yeah, he's still the editor of Dialogue. But his book is that he writes about in this chapter is Tabernacle of Clay, Gender and Sexuality in the in Modern Mormonism. And it was groundbreaking. He's now done another book called Queering Kinship in the Mormon Cosmos. So he's looking at sexual trends, sexual activity, sexual beings within modern Mormonism and within Mormonism, not only. So he's sort of, in many ways, picking up the gauntlet that that Connell, that whole thing that Connell worked on, and now taking it in even further, So Taylor writes his chapter about that. Elisa Polito, who is the granddaughter of Minerva. Help me, guys. Minerva. The great Mormon artist.
Yeah, Minerva. Oh gosh, now that you say it, I can't say it.
I can't think. Yeah, it's weird to.
I want to say Techart or something. Minerva.
Yeah, something like that. Tesher. Yeah, maybe it is. Yeah. So anyway, Elisa's her granddaughter, but that is not Elisa's claim to fame. Elisa's claim to fame is she is an amazing scholar who didn't get her PhD till much later in life, and then did her book on Margarito. He was a man. Batista. He was Mexican Mormon evangelizer, polygamist, dissident, and utopian founder in Mexico. Though he traveled the United States, interacted with general authorities, was an active believing member of the church. He just believed it a little too much, and decided that he needed to bring back communal and he was Batista was a person of the people, and he saw that the elite were controlling the Mexican classes, and so he was a dissident, and so he took that also into his religious beliefs and fought for the common person. And so, it makes sense that he would want utopian, that equality brought about. And so groundbreaking work that Elisa did. She won Best Biography for her book. And I think, I know the John Whitmer, but I don't know if MHA gave her Best. It's not here. Matter of fact, she doesn't. Let's see. Oh yeah, no, both Mormon History Association and John Whitmer. She won Best Bio. She is now currently doing oral history work with women, members of the church, women who've had cancer, I think, and they're recovered. It's a specific thing that, nobody's ever looked at before. And that's Elisa. Elisa goes into these areas that most people, well, first of all, because like she likes to say, nobody's interested in, but she's doing this groundbreaking work by doing these kinds of things. So that's Elisa, and that's her chapter is about her work on Margarito Batista. Did one of you have a question about that, or?
No, that sounds interesting. I've never heard his name, but I'm sure that's a fascinating chapter, just because, like, it's the unknown, like that perspective of, like, a radical fundamentalist who's also Hispanic,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Margarito Batista was part of what's called the Third Convention, and Mormonism Live did a whole show about it about 9 months ago, I believe.
Oh, so okay.
That's something to look for.
But people need to get Elisa's book too.
Right.
Elisa, it really is groundbreaking. People, it's like, well, the first book, the first Writing Mormon History, I had Daniel Stone write about his writing of William Bickerton and the Bickertonites, which is the Sidney Rigdon congregation. And they're still there. It's called the Church of Jesus Christ. Their headquarters is in, so their headquarters is in Monongahela, Pennsylvania. But they don't, all the records, the administration is actually in Greenburgh, Pennsylvania. So Monongahela is on the Monongahela River, southeast, I think, of Pittsburgh. And it's really cool. I've been there multiple times. And actually, they did they allowed me, it's open to the public. So it wasn't like I got a special invitation. But they allowed me to stay and watch the washing of feet ceremony. And they do it quarterly, I think. I think either quarterly or every 6 months they do it. And so I got in their Monongahela building. The Greensburg building is where they keep all their records. That's where they have a quorum of 12. They do it the correct way, where the Mormon Church does it, the Utah Church does it quorum of 15. Monongahela, or the Church of Jesus Christ, does a quorum of 12. And so they pick one person out of the 12 to be their president. And then, but they never replace that. He, and it is, I think, all he still. They have deaconesses, they call them. And I don't know if they have teachers that are women. And again, these are older. It's more like the way, in that particular way, they're more like the way the church was in Nauvoo and early Utah, that it's adults. And you have to be a member, and you're a deacon or a deaconess for a long time before you then go into a different. And I don't even think teacher is more of what they do. It's not so much. And again, I am not an expert, but just the different times I've been to that. An elder is usually who runs the congregation. And
I'll read one thing real quick from Wikipedia. According to the church doctrine, all ordained offices are called to their positions by revelation. No office within the church is paid, including the ministry.
That, I would say, that fits what I saw. I would say that fits. So anyway,
In contrast to another larger church in Utah, we'll say.
I wonder. I went back to the first volume again, but the multi-trillion now, whatever it is, religion. Anyway, but Daniel got a lot of flack and was almost pushed out of his congregation, and he's done podcasts. And if people are interested, they can read the pod or listen to the podcast. His chapter's more about him, right? Which again, he saw records that nobody else had seen. He got access. He had gotten first of all, Daniel's a great historian. Second, he's charismatic. And so he was like the perfect guy for that religion. But the people who run the organization today are not fans of William Bickerton. And so they really didn't like that William Bickerton's name got, this push forward that the other people, they really see the other people as being the true leaders and not William Bickerton. But obviously Daniel shows that that's not correct. And so anyway, okay, so that's that. So the reason I brought that up was because in many ways that's Elisa's my Daniel Stone of the first volume. She's bringing forward in her work, she's doing cutting edge of another prophet. And so
that's amazing.
It isn't it fun? It's so
well, I think Mormonism has such a unique history in its own world, and I mourn those great historians we've lost because their insight and knowledge is gone. So to have them published or to still write their stories, it is so fascinating because I don't think people who are in the church really get into that meat and potatoes of these older, ways or older prophets or older people in the history that, I love it. I mean, it's just.
Well, you're right. David Whitaker, this is early in my reading, so it would have been the late 80s. He was at Harold B. Lee Library, and he's one of the great bibliographers. His bibliographies that he wrote about Joseph Smith or Book of Mormon or different, are still standards that were published in Journal of Mormon History or Dialogue. And but anyway, so David said to me, he said, he goes, so, do you think you're going to continue this? So again, this is 80s, do you think you're going to continue studying about Mormon history? And I said, I don't think I can stop. I'm addicted. And he goes, that's exactly what happens. He said, you start down it and you can't stop. And Bill McKinnon, who wrote a chapter in Writing Mormon History, the first volume, he's an Episcopalian, never been Mormon his entire life. He wrote, or he met and then wrote his dissertation. He tells that story in the chapter, but he also tells it on podcast, that he met Lamar. But anyway, he was the great Western historian at Harvard, right? Harvard, Yale. And Bill, so that was how he got the bug. And he said, look at how many books are written every year on Rhode Island. He goes, none. How many books are written on Kentucky? Maybe lucky if one, in a decade or whatever. He goes, how many books are written on Mormonism every year? It's probably 50 or more, or 100. Texas, California, Civil War, Revolutionary War, Mormonism. When it comes to history, that's what people write about, So we Mormon, whatever you want to call us, we have an interest. We captivate audiences.
Absolutely. I hope someone one day puts it into a great mini series and tells the real true history of the church, take out the bodies out of the closet kind of story.
Well, that's hard. First of all, that's hard to do because it's hard to get, you both know Lindsay Hanson Park.
Hanson. Mm-hmm.
Lindsay is writing screenplays. She's been
I think she wrote a book.
What do you call it? Well, yeah, but I'm talking about her what Debbie's talking about with movies and series and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So Lindsay is doing that right now. That's what she's doing. Like she was part of Under the Banner of Heaven. And there's a new coming out on Netflix. There's a new show it's mainly about the West, the violence of the West, but Mormons obviously are very much included because the Mormon past, it's like what David Bigler said. He goes, Cedar City was not Dodge City. When people saying, well, the West was wild, and the Fancher Party were taking their chance going through, and David's response was, Cedar City was not Dodge City. There wasn't gunslinging every single day going on in Cedar City. Cedar City was made up of good, honest, religious people with the men, women, and children. And that's what kind of town. It was not a cow town. It was not like Abilene. It was not like Dodge City. Okay, so
can we say the same thing about Ogden though? Ogden was pretty dicey.
Well, because the
Ogden out of all
Ogden was, and there is a great book, and I tried to get him to write a chapter, and unfortunately, he just couldn't do it. But it's called Railroading Religion, and it's difficult to read. It's not for the light reading. It is very thick reading, but he did groundbreaking research in that. He's a professor down at UC Santa Barbara, and he's there with Ann Taves, and I wish I could remember his name right now. But anyway, his book is amazing. But anyway, so Lindsay's doing that. But like this new thing that's coming out, American Primeval, I think that's what it's called.
That's what it is. Yep.
Okay, so it's not going to be historically accurate completely. It's going to have, because in order to tell the story, you can't get bogged down on the detail. You can't do that. And so that's the thing with like Under the Banner of Heaven. If you do that, then pick up and, if you want, then read Will Bagley's Blood of the Prophet. If you want to get Mountain Meadows, that's what you need to do. You need to read Will Bagley's Blood of the Prophet. You don't need to read the other stuff, or you don't need to watch. If you really want it, you don't need to watch American Primeval if you only want the historical. But if you want to be entertained at the same time, get some information, which is and hopefully that's what Lindsay's American Primeval will do, is it will then get people going, oh, I need to pick up Will Bagley's, which, by the way, Will Bagley, his Blood of the Prophets was voted by Western Writers Association of America in the top 7 best nonfiction books ever written.
About American history.
It's like 1950 or something like that. Wow. And yeah, I mean, the Hampton Sides, the great, writer of American history. He's mainly known for his yacht, work and Mayflower and stuff like that. But he wrote a book called I can't think of it, but Blood and Thunder, and it's an amazing book. He uses Will Bagley. I mean, these guys use Will Bagley. They know what, they know where the good information is, so they go to Will Bagley. And so the point is out of that is that if that's what you want, all the nitty gritty detail, you read Will Bagley. But if you want to be able to tell a story, then you watch American Primeval and see how they do it. It's not all going to be correct. But Lindsay, like Lindsay with Under the Banner of Heaven, she called me up and she goes, "Hey Joe, we're dressing people up like soldiers. Is that what the Nauvoo Legion looked like?" And I, did some research, and I said, I got back with her and I said, no, they were dressed in their farmers' clothes. They were dressed. There was like one or two people in the entire, I think, I don't know if it was John Higby or who, that had some kind of a uniform, but that was it. Everybody else dressed in their work hats and their, they didn't dress in their Sunday best. They dressed in their work clothes because that's what they were. They were farmers. They were husbands. They were fathers, and that's how they dressed.
And instead of shouldering picks or whatever, they shouldered rifles. And they weren't that great of rifles. It's not like they had the great rifles either. But, if you're standing right next to somebody and they're unarmed, which is what the situation was at Mountain Meadows, you've got a group of people, they're standing next to you, they're in wagons, and you've got a rifle, and nobody else, the people who you're about to kill don't have any weapon. It's pretty easy to kill those people. And many of those people were killed by the butt of the gun, not so much by the lead ball. Almost all the children's skulls and women's were all, busted in by the butt of a gun. So, which means white men did the deed. That's the point. White men did the deed. But anyway,
and such a bloody story. I mean, my gosh, that story.
So I imagine So I imagine with Lindsay doing American Primeval, you're going to see more authentic,
some of that,
like that, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
But to tell the story, they're not going to have every, and we don't know. Yeah. See, that's the problem. We don't even know what the Fancher party talked about in the camp. We can guess what they talked about. Like I said to Will Bagley, who knew more about Mountain Meadows than a human being. And I even say he knew more than Juanita Brooks, because he saw records that Juanita Brooks did not have access to. I asked Will, I said, why would the Fanchers not just die in, if they knew the Mormon, because they knew that it was white people dressed as Indians who did that. But the Mormons and John D. Lee was there in that Monday of attack. Why would they go out? And Will said, he goes, that mystifies me too. He said, the only thing I can think of is that maybe they did the Masonic signs, which would have been that they would protect. The Masonic signs would be, you're my brother, we're going to protect you. He said, maybe it was something like that, but we don't know. We don't know why the Fancher train left the confines of their fort that they made with wagons. We don't know. They had no water, or very little water. They were going to run out of food. The Mormons were not selling food to them on the way. The only one that did give them, that helped them, then got his brains beaten in there, and I think Cedar City or wherever he was that sold the Fancher train wheat. But the Mormons then, the High Council then had ordered to take care of him, and so they beat him till he was senseless. No Danites in Utah. Nauvoo Legion didn't need, in Utah you didn't need Danites anymore.
Okay.
Even in Nauvoo you didn't need Danites. because you had the Nauvoo Legion, and you had the police force, and the police force was way better than the Danites. The Danites were the Danites were more difficult because they were secret. Where with the police, you could control, just control, and Brigham Young could control much better. So anyway, isn't it fun to get off on these weird?
It's such a bloody history. I mean, that's the thing. I'm amazed that Mormons were able to, change their reputation from basically a bunch of bloodthirsty thugs to, they're so nice and family oriented. I mean, talk about really putting spots on a, cow or something.
That'd be a good book.
You got to give David O. McKay that credit.
From Mormon Mafia to Latter-day Saint.
David O. McKay was amazing at changing the image of the church. Yeah. He really, yeah. So, yeah, fun stuff.
Chef's kiss on that, for sure.
What next author, Gary Topping. So Gary is an archivist and historian. He worked for the Utah State Historical Society. He also was in charge of the archives of the Roman Catholic Diocese in Salt Lake and Salt Lake Community College. He has written multiple books. He's the historian's historian. So he wrote a bio of Leonard Arrington on Leonard's writing books. He wrote it's a multi-person bio that's how he actually got on. So he wrote this multi-person bio and decided that Leonard needed his own book. But the multi-person bio is Juanita Brooks, Charles Kelly, or no, maybe it's not Charles, but Bernard DeVos, which is, by the way, a fun tie-in. So if you ever see the TV series Julia about Julia Child, who I've got a tie-in as a young boy about her, but I won't go.
Julie and Julia, is that the movie?
No. It's called Julia. It was an HBO. It is an HBO series or maybe MGM. I don't know. It's one of the pay ones, but it's really done well. And matter of fact, the guy who played in Frasier's brother plays her husband, and he's fantastic. And so, but her best friend is played by Frasier's wife in Cheers. BB something or other is her name. I can't think of her name, but anyway, she played Lilith, and she plays the child's best friend. She was their neighbor, but in Cambridge, I think they lived in Cambridge, and she was Julia's really closest friend, and convinced Julia to do the French cooking PBS show, and probably was a big influence on the maybe not the first recipe book, but at least the later ones. And she was Bernard DeVoto's wife, but she was his student in college. He's a professor and starts dating her and marries her, but she's brilliant. I mean, she's like this, got this super high IQ, anyway. And so that's a fun tie-in with, that Bernard DeVoto's wife was Julia Child's best friend. So anyway,
Avis DeVoto.
Bernard.
AVIS was the wife.
Oh, Ava, right? Ava.
Avis, AVIS.
Avis, that's right. Avis, yes, Avis. So So anyway, but so Gary's biography is Bernard DeVoto, Julia Child, Dale Morgan, I think, and somebody else. There's like 4 in the. So he did that. He did Leonard Arrington. He wrote a biography of Mike Quinn while Mike Quinn was alive. Okay. You gotta read Gary's chapter. It didn't go as well.
That sounds fun.
Now, Gary was not privy to some of the bad things that occurred out of it. Mike took his anger out on signature books more than he took his anger out on Gary. But anyway, so if you want the backstory of all that stuff, that's in Gary's chapter. So that's exciting. I mean, like I say, every page practically has something exciting. So that's Gary. Bruce Van Orden, and I've saved one person for last. I took her out of order because Bruce is one of my longtime friends, and that he wrote this chapter, he should win an award of some sorts. Bruce opens up about a horrific time of his life, and it almost destroyed the events almost destroyed his career, ruined his reputation, and made him, almost persona non grata. He was accused of plagiarism. Bruce will be the first one to say, yes, plagiarism did occur. It was just one of those
oversight.
And it really, I believe in Bruce's case, it truly was. And Bruce gives this, Bruce is not trying to defend himself. He is not trying to do that, but there is defense there for Bruce, and it's where it's one of the, it's a good lesson that professors who have their students write chapters and then they put them in the book without really going over them, and you're under pressure to get your book published, things are going to happen.
Red flags.
So now, if you read a Leonard Arrington book, you're going to go, oh, I've read that before somewhere else. Well, Leonard was smart because he just had the author who wrote the other book be his ghostwriter in the book. So like you can read Brigham Young American Moses and you're reading the Trek West stuff and you go, this sounds exactly like what Eugene Campbell wrote. Well, it's because Eugene Campbell wrote that chapter or those chapters in
without
the
getting
book.
credit.
Yeah, because yeah. So anyway,
does he list those writers in his acknowledgments or anything? Like, these people helped me?
It's been a while since I've gone through it, but I think in some of the books he does. In some of the books he doesn't. Okay, so it just depends on the book. Some of the books he does, some of the books he doesn't. Yeah, and acknowledgments of thanks for help kind of thing. Never, as far as I recall, no acknowledgement
direct
of,
attribution.
So and so wrote this chapter, or so and so wrote this book. Okay, I've saved the real interesting person they're all interesting, but Bernadette, obviously I'm going to destroy the rest of her name because I do not speak French. Regal Szilard. She, well, I'll read some of her bio. She's a professor emeritus of North American Studies at the University of Bordeaux, anyway, France. Point is, it's in France. She's a specialist of North American contemporary religions, notably of Mormonism and of native literatures and spiritualities. She's really famous, obviously, in Europe, of all the different religious books she's written. The only reason I got her is because she is a good friend of Mike Homer. And Mike convinced her. We sent her a copy of Writing Mormon History. She read it and she said, yeah, I'll do a chapter. And so this is fantastic because if we want an outsider, she is it. My guess is, I don't know, I don't ask these people their religion. I just know it from other things, like Gary Topping's Catholic. I would think that Bernadette's Catholic, being in France, but maybe not. Maybe she's not of any religion. Maybe she's, but I don't
She's
know.
a world-class historian.
But she's right. She's thought of as, she's got the respect of, what is it, 1/3 of the population or whatever, the
Western world.
It's just not the U.S. Yeah. So that's the authors. Now you got to go buy the book to read how fascinating these people are.
It sounds amazing. I want to read it. I mean, that's a great lineup of smart people.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
And so thanks for coming on the show, Joe. Everyone that's within hearing and watching distance, buy this book. It's fascinating. And I'm hoping that Joe will help me do some individual shows with some of these authors too in the future.
Yeah.
And so there's that to look forward to. Thanks for everything that you do, Joe, in the Mormon history world. Thanks, Debbie, for coming on the show and being amazed. Isn't this amazing?
It was so nice.
I'm always amazed. I just love being a part of this. Yeah. I learned so much.
Well, and it was nice meeting you, Debbie.
Yeah. Thank
So
you,
do you ever come to Sunstone?
I have not made it to a Sunstone. I had no idea that there was like this whole tribe of intellectuals who think like me and
Rainbow
process
Mormonism.
like me. So I know I need to go to at least one. And
you definitely do. It was when I went in 1988. I found my home.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
see, I feel like
when I was driving to my first Mormon History Association, Joe wasn't able to go. I was going to meet him for the first time. And so while I was driving through Nevada, I talked to him on the phone and asked him, what should I do? Who should I say hi to for you? What should I be looking out for? And so he made my Nevada portion of my trip go a lot faster. So thanks for that.
You're welcome.
And so anyhow, everybody, thanks for watching. Have a nice rest
Gene.
of the year. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.